Commander Zraktal stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His reptilian eyes glowed with satisfaction as he looked at the battle reports on his personal display. The 47th Conquest Fleet had just finished destroying another alien civilization. It had taken only 3 days to crush their defenses completely. "Commander, we are approaching the next target system," announced his second officer, Sub-Commander Thekaris. The younger Draconian scales were still bright green, showing his excitement for battle. Intelligence reports indicate a primitive species called humans inhabit the third planet. Zraktal turned his massive head toward the tactical display. 200 Draconian warships moved through space in perfect formation. Each ship was over a mile long and armed with enough firepower to destroy entire cities. The flagship, Eternal Dominion, was 3 times larger than the others. It carried weapons that could crack a planet's surface. "Tell me about these humans," Zraktal commanded. His voice was deep and cold, like grinding stone. Thekaris activated the intelligence briefing. On the main screen, images of Earth appeared, showing blue oceans and green continents. "They are a young species, Commander. They have only recently developed basic space travel. Their largest weapons use primitive nuclear fusion. Their population is scattered across multiple nations that often fight each other." Other Draconian officers on the bridge began laughing. The sound was like hissing steam mixed with breaking glass. "They fight among themselves?" asked the weapons officer. "How pathetic. They will surrender before we even reach their planet." Zraktal studied the images more carefully. The humans looked weak and soft compared to Draconians. They had no natural armor, no claws, no fangs. Their technology appeared centuries behind Draconian standard equipment. "How many ships do they have in space?" "Perhaps 50 small vessels, Commander. Most are designed for exploration, not war. They have some orbital defense platforms, but nothing that could threaten our shields." Thekaris seemed almost disappointed by how easy this conquest would be. The commander nodded slowly. In his 300 years of military service, he had conquered over 40 different species. Some had fought bravely. Others had surrendered immediately. But all had eventually knelt before Draconian power. These humans would be no different. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command center of the United Earth Defense Force headquarters. The underground facility was hidden beneath the mountains of Colorado. Warning lights flashed, red across dozens of control panels. The deep space monitoring stations had detected something impossible. "Captain, you need to see this," called out Communications Officer Lisa Campbell. Her voice was tight with worry. She had been tracking the approaching signals for the past 6 hours. "The computer analysis is complete. We have 200 large objects moving toward Earth at incredible speed." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the data scrolling across her screen. The numbers made no sense. Each object was massive, larger than anything humans had ever built. They were moving faster than any known propulsion system could achieve. "Are you certain this is accurate?" "I've checked it 3 times, sir. The objects will reach Earth's solar system in approximately 18 hours. Lisa's hands shook slightly as she typed commands into her console. "Captain, these things are huge. Each one is at least a mile long." Jake felt cold fear creep up his spine. He had served in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years. He had trained for asteroid impacts, solar flares, and even theoretical alien contact. But nothing had prepared him for this. "Contact Admiral Harrison immediately. Tell him we have a code red situation." Within minutes, Admiral Paul Harrison arrived at the command center. He was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He had commanded Earth's space forces during the Mars colony wars and was considered one of humanity's greatest military leaders. But as he looked at the sensor data, his face went pale. "Dear God," he whispered. "How did they get so close without us detecting them earlier?" Dr. Amy Foster, the Defense Force's chief scientist, rushed into the room carrying her laptop computer. She was young for her position, only 32 years old, but her intelligence was legendary. "Admiral, I've been analyzing the energy signatures. These objects are using some kind of advanced propulsion system we've never seen before." She connected her laptop to the main display screen. Complex mathematical equations and energy patterns filled the monitor. The power output from each object is enormous. If these are ships, they possess technology far beyond anything we understand. Admiral Harrison studied the data for several long minutes. The room was completely silent except for the humming of computers and the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment. Finally, he spoke. "Contact President Williams. Tell her we need an emergency meeting of the National Security Council within the hour." "What do you think they want?" asked Jake. The Admiral's expression was grim. "In my experience, Captain, when someone brings 200 warships to your planet, they're not coming to talk." Back in space, the Draconian fleet continued its approach toward Earth. Commander Zraktal had called a meeting of his senior officers in the flagship's main conference room. The chamber was enormous, with a ceiling that stretched 50 feet high. Holographic displays showed tactical information about the target system. "The conquest will begin in standard fashion," Zraktal announced to his officers. "We will broadcast surrender demands to the human leadership. They will have 72 hours to submit completely to Draconian rule. If they refuse, we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of their major cities." "Which city should we target first, Commander?" asked the tactical officer. "Their largest population center. The intelligence reports call it New York City. 8 million humans live there. Its destruction will show the others that resistance is futile." Sub-Commander Thekris raised a clawed hand. "Commander, should we not simply destroy their space-based defenses first? Their orbital platforms might pose some minor threat to our smaller ships." Zraktal's laugh was like the sound of breaking bones. "Those primitive platforms, their weapons could not even scratch our shields. No, we will follow standard procedure. First the surrender demand, then the demonstration of power, then total conquest." The other officers nodded in agreement. The Draconian way of war had proved successful for over 1,000 years. Superior technology and overwhelming force had brought hundreds of worlds under their control. Earth would be just another victory in their long history of expansion. As the fleet moved closer to Earth, automated systems began preparing for battle. Weapon systems powered up. Shield generators hummed with energy. Landing craft were loaded with Draconian ground troops. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But in the darkness of space, neither the approaching Draconians nor the waiting humans could predict what would happen when two very different philosophies of war finally met. The galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. President Karen Williams stood at the podium in the White House press room, looking out at reporters from around the world. Behind her, the presidential seal displayed the American eagle with its wings spread wide. But today, she was not speaking just for America. She was speaking for all of humanity. The emergency meeting with world leaders had lasted 12 hours. Every major nation had agreed to put aside their differences. For the first time in human history, the entire planet was truly united. The alien fleet would arrive in 6 hours, and Earth needed to present a single strong response. "My fellow human beings," President Williams began, her voice steady despite the enormous pressure. "Today we face the greatest challenge in our species' history. An alien fleet of 200 warships approaches our planet. They have sent us a message, demanding our complete surrender." She paused, looking directly into the cameras that were broadcasting her words to every corner of Earth. In homes, offices, and public squares, over 7 billion people watched and listened. "I want to be clear about something. We will not surrender. We will not bow down to these invaders. We will fight for our freedom, our families, and our future." The reaction was immediate. In cities across the globe, people gathered in the streets. Some were afraid, but many were angry. Humans had never reacted well to bullies, and these aliens were the biggest bullies in the galaxy. Signs appeared in windows reading, "Earth will not surrender," and "Human pride forever." At Peterson Space Force Base in Colorado, Colonel Ryan Parker was preparing Earth's hastily assembled defense fleet. He stood in the main hangar, looking at the 50 ships that would represent humanity's space-based resistance. The vessels were a mixed collection of military cruisers, research ships, and even converted cargo haulers. None of them had been designed for the kind of battle they were about to face. "Colonel, the retrofit teams have finished installing the new weapon systems," reported Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner. She was his second in command and one of the best tactical officers in the Earth Defense Force. "Every ship now carries the maximum number of nuclear missiles we could fit." Ryan nodded, but his expression remained worried. "Beth, we both know those missiles might not even scratch their shields. The energy readings from their ships show defensive systems far beyond anything we understand." "Maybe, sir, but Dr. Foster's team has been working on something. She thinks she found a weakness in their technology." Beth handed him a datapad with the latest scientific analysis. "She wants to brief all ship commanders in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, at UEDF headquarters, Dr. Amy Foster was running final calculations on her computer. She had been awake for 36 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. Her team of scientists had been analyzing every piece of data about the approaching alien fleet. What they had discovered might be humanity's only hope. "Dr. Foster, the commanders are ready for your briefing," said her assistant, Dr. Kevin Price. He looked as tired as she felt, but his eyes were bright with excitement about their discoveries. Amy gathered her notes and walked to the main briefing room. 50 ship commanders sat at tables, their faces showing a mixture of fear and determination. These were the men and women who would lead humanity's desperate fight for survival. She needed to give them hope. "Commanders, I'll be direct." Amy began activating the main display screen. "Our enemy has superior technology, superior numbers, and superior firepower, but they also have weaknesses." The screen showed detailed scans of the alien ships. Red circles highlighted specific areas on their hulls. "These aliens rely heavily on energy shields for protection. Their shields are incredibly strong, but they use a specific frequency pattern that we can exploit." Colonel Parker leaned forward. "What kind of exploitation are we talking about, Doctor?" "Resonance cascade failure," Amy replied. "If we hit their shields with precisely timed energy bursts at specific frequencies, we can create a feedback loop that will overload their entire defensive system. It's like breaking a wine glass with the right musical note." The commanders began talking among themselves, excitement building in their voices. For the first time since the aliens had been detected, they had something that sounded like a real plan. "There's more," Amy continued. "These aliens appear to use highly advanced computer systems to control their ships and weapons, but advanced systems often have a critical weakness. They're programmed to expect logical, predictable behavior from their enemies." Lieutenant Commander Turner raised her hand. "You're suggesting we fight illogically?" "Exactly. Human military. History is full of successful tactics that seemed crazy at the time. Surprise attacks, desperate charges, kamikaze runs. If we can confuse their computer systems by acting unpredictably, we might gain crucial advantages in battle." On the other side of the planet, Marine General Chris Martinez was coordinating ground-based defenses. His headquarters in Virginia was a hive of activity, as thousands of soldiers prepared for possible alien landing forces. Reports were coming in from military bases around the world. Every nation was mobilizing its armed forces. "General, we have confirmation that civilian volunteers are organizing in every major city," reported his aide, Captain Steve Baker. "People are forming neighborhood defense groups, stockpiling supplies and preparing shelter areas for non-combatants." Chris nodded approvingly. Throughout history, human civilians had shown remarkable courage when their homes were threatened. "Make sure they're coordinating with local military commanders. If these aliens try ground assaults, every person who can hold a weapon might make the difference." At Cheyenne Mountain, Air Force General Helen Clark was working with her staff to coordinate atmospheric defenses. Earth's air forces would be the second line of defense if the space battle went badly. Fighter jets, surface-to-air missiles, and orbital defense platforms were all being prepared for combat. "General, we're receiving reports from around the globe," announced Major Kelly White, her communications officer. "Every Air Force base is reporting maximum readiness. Civilian airports are being converted to military use. We'll have over 10,000 aircraft ready for combat within the hour." In small towns and big cities, ordinary humans were preparing for the extraordinary. Factory worker Tim Johnson in Detroit had joined his local defense group and was learning to operate military radio equipment. Teacher Mary Allen in Phoenix was helping to organize emergency shelters in school buildings. Farmer Pete Wilson in Kansas was teaching his neighbors how to hide food supplies and equipment from potential alien searches. The most remarkable thing was how quickly old enemies became allies. Nations that had been hostile to each other for decades were now sharing intelligence and resources. Military units that had never worked together were coordinating battle plans. Humans had always been good at fighting, but they were discovering they were even better at fighting together. As the alien fleet drew closer to Earth, humanity was transforming itself from a divided collection of nations into a single, determined species. The Draconians had expected to find a weak, frightened enemy. Instead, they were about to encounter something they had never faced before. The entire world united in defiance, willing to fight to the death for their freedom. The next few hours would determine whether humanity would continue to exist as a free species or whether Earth would become just another conquered world in the Draconian Empire. But one thing was already certain. The aliens were going to discover that humans were very different from any enemy they had ever faced before. The 72-hour deadline had passed. Commander Zraktal stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, his reptilian features twisted into an expression of cold anger. The humans had not only refused to surrender, but their leader had actually declared war on the Draconian Empire. No species had ever shown such foolish defiance. All ships, prepare for attack formation, Zraktal commanded into his communication device. Across the fleet, 200 massive warships began moving into their traditional battle arrangement. The formation had been used successfully for over 1,000 years. It concentrated maximum firepower while providing overlapping shield coverage for all vessels. Sub-Commander Theckerus checked his tactical display. "Commander, the human ships are approaching. 50 vessels total, just as intelligence predicted. They appear to be moving in a very strange pattern." Zraktal looked at the main screen showing the advancing human fleet. The ships were indeed moving oddly. Instead of the logical military formations used by every other species, the humans seemed to be flying in random directions. Some ships were spinning while they flew forward. Others were making sharp turns for no apparent reason. "Their flight patterns make no sense," observed the weapons officer. "Our targeting computers cannot predict their movements. They appear to be flying like they are drunk or insane." "Primitive species often lack proper military discipline," Zraktal replied dismissively. "Their chaotic flying will make them easier targets. Begin the attack." Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, Defiant Hope. Around him, his crew worked frantically at their stations. Through the main viewing window, he could see the enormous alien fleet approaching like a wall of death. Each enemy ship was larger than anything humans had ever built, and their weapons were already beginning to glow with deadly energy. "All ships, remember the plan," Jake spoke into his communication system. "Chaos Protocol is now active. Fly like your lives depend on it, because they do." The Chaos Protocol was Dr. Amy Foster's crazy idea based on her analysis of alien technology. The Draconian ships used advanced computer systems to aim their weapons and coordinate their attacks. These computers were designed to fight logical, predictable enemies. But humans were neither logical nor predictable when their survival was at stake. Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner was coordinating the attack from the tactical station. "Captain, all ships are reporting ready. Nuclear missiles are armed and targeting systems are locked on enemy shield generators. Remember, Beth, we need to hit them at exactly the right frequency to create the resonance cascade. Dr. Foster calculated we'll only get one chance at this." The first Draconian plasma beams lanced through space toward the human fleet. The weapons were incredibly powerful, designed to destroy enemy ships with single hits. But most of the beams missed their targets completely. Human ships that should have been flying in straight lines were suddenly diving, spinning, or accelerating in random directions. On the Eternal Dominion, the weapons officer was becoming frustrated. "Commander, our targeting computers cannot lock onto the human ships. They keep changing direction without any logical pattern. It's like they're trying to confuse our systems on purpose." Zraktal's eyes narrowed. He had never encountered such tactics before. Manual targeting, then. Our gunners will have to aim by eye instead of relying on computers. But manual targeting was much slower and less accurate. The Draconian fleet had become dependent on their advanced technology over centuries of easy conquests. Their gunners were out of practice with basic skills. Meanwhile, the human ships were following Dr. Foster's plan perfectly. They flew in chaotic patterns while using rapid-fire kinetic weapons to bombard specific points on Draconian shields. The alien shields were incredibly strong, but they had a weakness. When hit at precisely the right frequency, they would begin to vibrate and create feedback loops. Aboard the human cruiser Thunderstrike, Captain Nick Taylor watched his weapons officer fire round after round at a Draconian destroyer. "Keep hitting. That same spot, Lieutenant. The frequency generator is working perfectly." "Captain, look at their shields," called out his tactical officer. "They're starting to flicker." On the Draconian destroyer, alarm signals were sounding throughout the ship. The shield generators were overheating as resonance waves built up in the protective energy field. The ship's engineer was frantically trying to adjust the shield frequency, but the human weapons kept hitting at different frequencies, preventing any successful compensation. "Shield generators critical," announced the ship's computer in the Draconian language. "Cascade failure imminent." The destroyer's captain had only seconds to react. "All power to backup shields. Emergency Protocol 7. But it was too late. The shield matrix collapsed completely, leaving the destroyer vulnerable for the first time in the battle. Human missiles, which had been bouncing harmlessly off the shields, suddenly had a clear path to the ship's hull. The explosion was visible across the entire battlefield. The Draconian destroyer broke apart in a brilliant flash of light and expanding debris. For a moment, the battle stopped as both sides stared at the impossible sight. A human ship had actually destroyed a Draconian warship. On Earth, billions of people watched the space battle through telescopes and satellite feeds. When the first alien ship exploded, celebrations erupted in every major city. People ran into the streets, cheering and crying with joy. For the first time since the alien fleet had arrived, humanity had hope. Commander Zraktal could not believe what he was seeing. "How is this possible? Their weapons should not be able to penetrate our shields." Sub-Commander Thekris was studying the battle data on his screen. "Commander, they are using some kind of resonance weapon. The humans are hitting our shields at specific frequencies that cause system failures. Then adjust our shield frequencies to compensate. We're trying, sir, but they keep changing their attack frequencies. It's like they know exactly how our shields work." On the human flagship, Dr. Amy Foster was monitoring the battle from the science station. She had been right about the alien weakness, but she knew one victory was not enough. The Draconians still had overwhelming numbers and firepower. Humanity needed to press their advantage quickly. "Captain Morrison, we need to target their command ships," she advised. "If we can disable their fleet coordination, their superior numbers won't matter." Jake nodded and opened communication to all human ships. "All vessels, focus fire on the largest enemy ships. Those are their command vessels. Use the resonance frequency data Dr. Foster is sending to your targeting computers." The battle was turning into something no one had expected. Human ships, flying in chaotic patterns that confused alien targeting systems, were systematically destroying Draconian shields and delivering devastating attacks. The aliens' superior technology was being turned against them by human ingenuity and determination. But the Draconians were not helpless. As more of their ships began to fall, they started adapting their tactics. Manual targeting improved with practice. Shield frequencies were adjusted more quickly. The aliens had centuries of military experience, and they were beginning to use it. "Human ships are taking heavy damage," reported Beth Turner. "We've lost 12 vessels in the last 10 minutes. Jake watched as another human ship exploded under Draconian fire. Brave men and women were dying all around him, but they were also proving something important. Humans could fight back against seemingly impossible odds. They could make the galaxy's most feared military force bleed. "All ships, continue the attack," Jake commanded. "We're showing them that humans are not easy prey. Every alien ship we destroy sends a message to the entire galaxy." The battle raged on through space, with both sides suffering losses. But something fundamental had changed. The Draconian Empire's reputation for invincibility had been shattered. Across the galaxy, other alien species were receiving reports of the impossible battle. Humans were not just fighting back against the Draconians. They were winning. The war for Earth's freedom had truly begun, and the outcome would shock the entire galaxy. News of the first Draconian ship's destruction traveled across the galaxy, faster than light through subspace communication networks. On 1,000 different worlds, alien civilizations that had lived under Draconian rule for centuries watched the impossible battle with growing amazement. The species they had dismissed as primitive savages were actually fighting back against the galaxy's most feared military force. On the planet Kepler 442b, the blue-skinned Zalari people gathered around public viewing screens in their capital city. They had been conquered by the Draconians 50 years ago and forced to pay tribute ever since. Elder Vexani, leader of the resistance movement, watched human ships destroy another alien destroyer and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades: hope. "Look how they fight," he whispered to his followers. "They have no fear. They attack ships 10 times their size without hesitation." Similar scenes were playing out across hundreds of worlds. The Draconians had built their empire on the belief that superior technology and overwhelming force would always defeat inferior species. But humans were proving that courage and determination could overcome even the greatest technological advantages. Back in Earth's solar system, Commander Zaraktal was discovering that his easy conquest had become a nightmare. In just 6 hours of fighting, he had lost 37 ships. The human fleet was down to 28 vessels, but they were still fighting with the same fierce determination they had shown from the beginning. "Commander, we are receiving emergency communications from the homeworld," announced his communications officer. "High Command is demanding an explanation for our losses." Zraktal's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. How could he explain that a primitive species was defeating the 47th Conquest Fleet? "Tell them we are dealing with unexpected resistance. Victory will be achieved soon." But privately, he was beginning to doubt his own words. These humans fought like nothing he had ever encountered. When their ships were damaged, they used them as weapons, ramming Draconian vessels in suicide attacks. When their weapons were destroyed, they improvised new ones from spare parts. When they should have retreated, they charged forward into impossible odds. Subcommander Thekris approached his commander's chair. "Sir, the humans are attempting to land ground forces on our supply ships. They are using small shuttles to board our vessels directly." "Impossible. No species has ever been foolish enough to attempt boarding actions against Draconian ships. Nevertheless, it is happening. Human soldiers are fighting our security teams in hand-to-hand combat aboard the supply vessel Crushing Victory. On board the Draconian supply ship, Captain Steve Baker led a team of 12 Marine commandos through narrow corridors filled with smoke and flashing emergency lights. The Marines had volunteered for what everyone considered a suicide mission: boarding an alien ship to plant explosives in its reactor core. "Stay together," Baker whispered into his radio. "Remember, these aliens are bigger and stronger than us, but they've never fought humans before. Use speed and surprise." The Marines moved through the ship like ghosts, using their smaller size to hide in spaces too small for the larger Draconians. When they encountered alien soldiers, they used tactics the reptilian warriors had never seen before. Instead of standing and fighting like honorable warriors, the humans used ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, and psychological warfare. Sergeant Alex Chen threw a stun grenade around a corner, then attacked the confused Draconians with a combination of martial arts and improvised weapons. The aliens were trained to fight enemies who used similar tactics to their own, but humans had learned warfare through thousands of years of fighting each other, developing techniques that were completely foreign to Draconian military doctrine. "Reactor room secured," Baker reported as his team reached their target. "Planting. Charges now. We'll have about 5 minutes to get off this ship before it explodes." The Marines had trained for this mission knowing they probably wouldn't survive. But they also knew that destroying even one Draconian supply ship would hurt the enemy fleet's ability to continue fighting. Every small victory brought humanity closer to overall survival. Meanwhile, in Earth's atmosphere, Major Kelly White was leading a squadron of human fighter jets against Draconian landing craft. The aliens had finally decided to attempt a ground invasion, sending 40 large transports toward major population centers. "All fighters target the engine sections," Kelly commanded over the radio. "These transports are heavily armored, but Dr. Foster says their engines are vulnerable to missile attack." The human pilots dove toward the alien transports like modern-day knights charging into battle. Their jets were tiny compared to the massive alien ships, but they were fast and maneuverable. Most importantly, they were flown by pilots who would rather die than let their planet be conquered. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez pulled his fighter into a steep dive, lining up his missiles on a transport heading toward New York City. "This is for every human who ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of freedom," he said to himself as he fired. The transport's engines exploded in a brilliant fireball. The massive ship began falling toward the Atlantic Ocean instead of reaching its target. Inside, thousands of Draconian ground troops prepared for a water landing they had never trained for. On the ground, General Chris Martinez was coordinating Earth's defensive preparations. Reports were coming in from around the world as Draconian landing craft reached the surface. The aliens who survived the crashes were about to learn that humans were just as dangerous on land as they were in space. "General, the aliens have landed forces outside London, Tokyo, and Mexico City," reported his aide. "But something strange is happening. Our ground troops are not just holding their positions. They're actually pushing the aliens back." Chris smiled grimly. He had expected this. The Draconians were used to conquering species that fought like they did, using superior technology and overwhelming force. But humans had learned warfare through constant conflict with each other. They knew how to fight dirty, how to use terrain to their advantage, and how to turn any object into a weapon. In the ruins of East London, Corporal Linda Ross led a squad of British soldiers against a Draconian patrol. The aliens were twice her size and armed with energy weapons that could cut through steel. But they were also predictable, following standard military procedures that made them easy to ambush. "Remember, these lizards have never fought in an urban environment," she told her squad. "Use the buildings, use the rubble, make them come to you." The Draconians advanced down the street in perfect formation, their energy rifles ready to destroy any human resistance. What they found instead were empty buildings and silent rubble. Then the attacks began from every direction. Sniper fire from rooftops, explosives hidden in abandoned cars, and ambushes from sewers and basement tunnels. The alien patrol found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't see, using tactics they didn't understand. Within an hour, half the patrol was dead and the survivors were retreating in confusion. Similar battles were taking place around the globe. In Tokyo, human soldiers used the city's complex subway system to appear and disappear like ghosts. In Mexico City, civilians joined the fight, using everything from hunting rifles to homemade explosives against the invaders. But the most shocking development was happening in space. Captain Jake Morrison had gathered the remaining human ships for one final desperate assault on the Draconian flagship. The Eternal Dominion was 3 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. But it was also the command center for the entire alien invasion. "All ships, this is our chance," Jake announced over the communication system. "If we can destroy their flagship, their whole fleet will be thrown into chaos. Remember Dr. Foster's analysis. The Eternal Dominion's shields have the same weakness as all the others." The surviving human ships, now only 15 vessels, began their attack run on the massive alien flagship. They flew in the same chaotic patterns that had confused Draconian targeting computers throughout the battle, but now they had a much more dangerous target. Commander Zraktal watched the approaching human ships with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. These creatures refused to accept defeat even when facing impossible odds. "All weapons, focus fire on the human flagship. Destroy their leader and the rest will surrender." But as the Draconian weapons opened fire, Zraktal realized he had made a critical error. The humans weren't trying to destroy his ship with conventional weapons. They were using their resonance frequency attacks to bring down the Eternal Dominion's shields, just as they had done to dozens of other Draconian vessels. "Shield generators failing," announced his engineering officer. The humans are using coordinated frequency attacks. All shield sections are experiencing cascade failures. For the first time in 300 years of military service, Commander Zraktal felt the cold touch of fear. His supposedly invincible flagship was about to become as vulnerable as every other ship in his fleet. The tide of battle was turning, and the galaxy would never be the same. The shields of the Eternal Dominion flickered and died as human frequency weapons created massive resonance cascades throughout the defensive systems. For the first time in 1,000 years, the flagship of a Draconian conquest fleet was completely vulnerable to enemy attack. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of Defiant Hope, watching the enormous alien ship grow larger in his viewing screen. Around him, his crew worked frantically to coordinate the final assault. This was humanity's one chance to end the battle decisively. All ships, target the command sections, Jake ordered into his communication system. Dr. Foster's analysis shows their central command matrix is located in the upper tower. If we destroy that, their entire fleet coordination will collapse. The 15 remaining human ships dove toward the massive flagship, like ancient fighter planes attacking a battleship. Their nuclear missiles streaked through space, no longer blocked by the aliens' protective shields. Explosions began blooming across the surface of the Eternal Dominion as human weapons found their targets. On the alien flagship's bridge, Commander Zraktal felt his ship shaking under the human assault. Alarm sirens were screaming throughout the vessel as critical systems began failing one by one. His communications officer was receiving panic reports from across the fleet. "Commander, 17 more ships are reporting shield failures," the officer announced. "The humans are using their frequency weapons against the entire fleet simultaneously." Zraktal's reptilian features were twisted with rage and disbelief. In 300 years of conquest, he had never imagined that primitive creatures could threaten the Draconian Empire. These humans were supposed to be weak and easily defeated. Instead, they had become the most dangerous enemy the Draconians had ever faced. "All remaining ships retreat to minimum safe distance," he commanded. "We will regroup and request reinforcements from the homeworld." But Sub-Commander Thekris shook his head sadly. "Sir, the human ships are pursuing our retreating vessels. They are not allowing us to disengage from battle." Captain Steve Baker's Marine boarding party had successfully planted their explosives in the supply ship's reactor core. As they fought their way back to their escape shuttles, the charges detonated with devastating force. The explosion was so powerful that it destroyed 2 nearby Draconian cruisers and damaged several others. "Mission accomplished," Baker reported over the radio as his shuttle escaped the expanding fireball. "1 supply ship and 3 escorts destroyed. The enemy's ability to resupply their fleet has been severely damaged." In Earth's atmosphere, Major Kelly White was leading the final assault against Draconian landing forces. The alien ground invasion had been a complete disaster. Human pilots, soldiers, and even civilians had fought with such determination that most of the landing craft never reached their targets. "All fighter squadrons, the aliens are trying to evacuate their remaining ground troops," Kelly announced. "Do not let any transport ships escape. We want them to remember what happens when someone tries to conquer Earth." Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez spotted a Draconian transport trying to lift off from the ruins of what had been a landing zone near Los Angeles. His fighter jet screamed through the sky as he lined up his final missile on the fleeing ship. "This is for every human who refused to surrender," he said as he fired. The transport exploded in midair, its debris falling harmlessly into the Pacific Ocean. On the ground, the few Draconian soldiers who had survived the landing were discovering that humans were just as dangerous in person as they were in their ships. Corporal Linda Ross and her squad had trapped an alien patrol in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath London. "Surrender now and we will treat you according to the laws of war," she called out in the Draconian language that she had learned from captured communications. The alien patrol leader's response was a blast of energy fire that melted the concrete wall behind her. "Very well," Linda said to her squad. "They want to do this the hard way." The humans used their knowledge of the tunnel system to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The Draconians, trained for open battlefield combat, found themselves completely outmatched in the close-quarters urban fighting that humans had perfected through centuries of warfare. Back in space, the battle for the Eternal Dominion was reaching its climax. Captain Jake Morrison had brought his ship alongside the massive alien flagship, close enough to see individual windows and weapon ports on its hull. "Jake, we're receiving a transmission from the alien commander," reported Lieutenant Commander Beth Turner. "He wants to speak with you directly." Jake nodded. Throughout human history, warriors had often spoken to each other before the final battle. "Put him on screen." Commander Zraktal's reptilian face appeared on the main viewing screen. His eyes showed a mixture of rage, fear, and something that might have been respect. "Human Commander, I am Zraktal of the Draconian Empire. In 300 years of conquest, no species has ever caused such damage to my fleet." "Then perhaps you should have chosen your targets more carefully," Jake replied calmly. "We are not the weak prey you were expecting. Indeed, your species fights with a ferocity I have never encountered. But this battle is not over. Even if you destroy this fleet, the Empire will send others. Earth will eventually fall." Jake smiled, grimly. "Maybe, but every Draconian ship we destroy sends a message to the galaxy. Humans are not easy victims, and more importantly, we will not stay on Earth forever. If your Empire wants a war, we will bring that war to your doorstep." The alien commander's eyes widened with surprise. The thought that humans might actually counterattack had never occurred to him. Species conquered by the Draconians typically focused only on defending their homeworlds. "You would dare attack the Empire directly? Commander, you have no idea what humans are capable of when we are properly motivated, and your Empire has just given us the best motivation possible. You threatened our families and our freedom." The communication ended as Zraktal realized the terrible truth. These humans were not just defending themselves, they were preparing to become conquerors in their own right, and they had just learned how to defeat Draconian technology. Dr. Amy Foster's voice crackled over the ship's communication system. "Captain, I'm detecting massive power buildups in the flagship's reactor core. I think they're preparing to self-destruct rather than be captured. All ships, maximum acceleration away from the flagship," Jake ordered immediately. "The aliens are about to destroy their own ship." The Eternal Dominion erupted in a chain of explosions that lit up the entire solar system. The blast was visible from Earth's surface, appearing like a new star in the sky. When the light faded, the flagship was gone, along with Commander Zraktal and his entire crew. The remaining 23 Draconian ships attempted to escape toward deep space, but human vessels pursued them relentlessly. Captain Nick Taylor's ship Thunderstrike rammed a fleeing destroyer, destroying both vessels but ensuring that the aliens could not escape to report human tactics to their homeworld. By the end of the day, no Draconian ships remained in Earth's solar system. The most feared military force in the galaxy had been completely destroyed by a species they had considered primitive and weak. President Karen Williams addressed the world once again, but this time, her audience extended far beyond Earth. Alien civilizations across the galaxy were listening as she spoke. "Today, humanity proved that freedom is worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. We did not seek this war, but we finished it. To any species in the galaxy that desires freedom from oppression, know that Earth stands ready to help. The age of Draconian domination is ending." Admiral Paul Harrison was already making plans for humanity's expansion into space. Dr. Amy Foster was studying captured Draconian technology to help humanity's new allies. Captain Jake Morrison had been promoted to lead the first interstellar fleet in human history. Across the galaxy, rebellions were breaking out on worlds that had been conquered by the Draconians. The empire that had ruled through fear and superior technology was crumbling as species after species rose up against their oppressors. The Draconians had come to Earth expecting easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous: human determination to spread freedom throughout the stars. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. Earth's greatest trial had become its greatest triumph, and the beginning of humanity's journey to the stars.